Solve and graph your solution. Write your answer in interval notation. We have 7x is less than 6x squared plus x cubed. Well, in order to solve this, we need all of our x's on the same side of the inequality. And then we should write it in a good order. 0 is less than x cubed plus 6x squared minus 7x. So to solve this inequality, we'll try and factor. X is common to all three terms, leaving us with x times x squared plus 6x minus 7. And we can continue to factor, breaking down our first term of the trinomial and our last term and checking our signs. The result should be positive. The signs need to be different. So now we have three factors. Multiplied together is greater than 0. Well, again, we really won't know which ones are greater than 0 and which ones are less than 0. So we'll change this inequality to an equal sign. And we'll have x times x plus 7 times x minus 1 is all equal to 0. And then we can use a zero product property that says that if you're multiplying and 0 is your answer, then you had to have multiplied by 0. So either x is 0, or x plus 7 is equal to 0, or x minus 1 is equal to 0. So we have x equals 0, and x equals negative 7, and x equals positive 1. So if we put that on a number line, we want a negative 7, so I'll go negative 9. So if I go by odd numbers, I can fit this on my screen, and then I just know that 0 is here between negative 1 and positive 1. So the numbers that I'm going to test are numbers around the answers that I found. I'm not going to test these numbers. I found negative 7 and 0 and positive 1. So the numbers that I'm going to test will be on the other side of negative 7, like negative 9, between negative 7 and 0, like negative 1, between 0 and 1. Well, this is where things get a little tricky. A number between there is like a half. And then on the other side of 1 is something like the number 3. And all of those get tested back in the original inequality. I'll first test negative 9 in that original inequality and see what we come up with. Negative 9 times 7 is negative 63. Is that less than negative 9 squared is positive 81. Positive 81 times 6 is 486 plus negative 9 raised to the third power is negative 729. Simplifying that, we get negative 63 is supposed to be less than a negative 243. And a negative 63 is not less than a negative 243, so I don't want that answer. This time I'll test the negative 1 in the original inequality. And 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. Is that less than negative 1 squared is positive 1 times 6 is 6 plus negative 1 cubed is negative 1. So is negative 7 less than 5? That's a yes. And so negative 1 lived between 0 and negative 7, so I'm going to shade that area. And I'm going to continue to test. This time I'll put the positive 1/2 into the original inequality and see what we come up with. You might want your calculators on this one. 7 times 1/2 is 7 halves. Is that less than 1/2 squared is 1/4 times 6 is 3 halves? And 1/2 raised to the third power is 1/8. So we have 7 halves, or 3.5, is less than, adding these two fractions together, 3 halves plus 1/8 is equal to 1 5/8, which is not true. So if it's not true, then there's not going to be any shading between 0 and 1. We have one last number to test. We need to test positive 3. See if on the other side of 1 those numbers are true. So if I put a positive 3 in the original inequality and clean this up, 7 times 3 is 21. Is that less than 3 squared is 9 times 6 is 54 plus 3 raised to the third power is 27. And 54 plus 27 is 81. 21 less than 81? Very true. Yes, indeed. So that means that we want to shade on the other side of 1. So our interval notation for this answer is -7 up to the number we found, 0. And then we'll unite it with the other piece, which started again at 1 and went forever.